Thank you, Bonnie. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I move on to the remarks that I had initially prepared, I want to make the following statement. In the past few days, we have seen great turmoil throughout this country. In many of our cities, people have taken to the streets, born out of frustration, and unfortunately, some have turned violent. In our own city, we saw last night what can happen when things become violent. I don't want the fact to be lost that many of our citizens have peacefully held vigils and demonstrations without incidents, and I am proud of our citizens who have been peaceful in their protests. The violence and destruction of property that occurred last night is unacceptable. To those of you who participated in the criminal acts last night and who may be patting yourselves on the back this morning, I say to you that you have done nothing to advance the cause of equality. We must each take personal responsibility for our actions and hold ourselves accountable. I fully support the city manager's local declaration of emergency and support her call for a voluntary curfew in the absence of our authority to declare a mandatory curfew. I call on this community, all members of this community, to let cooler heads prevail. We should be better than this. I pray that we are. I pray that we can be. Last week, many of us watched in horror as George Floyd, an African-American man, was murdered by officers of the Minneapolis police force. Before that came the video of another African-American man hunted down and shot in the streets of Georgia, and the murder of Breonna Taylor during the execution of a no-knock warrant in Kentucky. These and so many other terrible acts of violence against people of color demonstrate an inescapable reality. Far too many members of our society are still not treated with the same empathy, kindness, fairness, or justice that they deserve, simply because of the color of their skin, the color of my skin. Bigotry can be subtle and corrosive. It is present when we use words that are insensitive, when we make snap judgments based on appearance, when we presume an understanding of another's reality that has been born of a lifetime of experiencing prejudice. I ask myself today, I ask myself this weekend, how can this still happen in a country graced with so much good fortune and rich ideals? But to the many people suffering the pain of discrimination, this is no surprise. This is daily life where they encounter exclusion, fear, self-doubt, despair for a lack of opportunity, unequal treatment, and sometimes, sadly, extreme violence. I've seen the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. shared a lot recently on social media, but I want to remind everyone that while certainly Dr. King is well known for his words of nonviolence to which we all ascribe, he also said that history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. As Dr. Ibram Kendi writes, you must be anti-racist because just not being not racist isn't enough anymore. Each of us bears responsibility to do everything in our powers to change the abhorrent reality confronting so many people. Ordinary actions some of us take for granted, like driving, jogging, playing in the park, visiting a store, or walking at night, can be risky for some members of our community because of systemic and deeply ingrained racism. We must rise up and speak out for inclusivity and equality, and we must organize to actively protect those who are most vulnerable. I have said to many in our community during the past couple of years that we only have one life. Each of us is given one opportunity to live with intentionality on how we treat others, how we respect others, how we have to learn from our history and vow not to repeat our country's worst of behaviors, deeds, and actions that to this day and in this hour continue to stain our country. We have to intentionally unify around our love for humanity, decency, and create our new pathway forward. Before, we were wondering how would we come out of the pandemic the last time I stood before you. Now we are wondering how will we stay together as a community and a nation, not allowing the distractions of divisiveness drive our narrative going forward. Together, collectively, our prayers for peace will be heard, our belief in justice will be proven. It should not take a death to make us realize that as a community, as a people, we are the same. Lynchburg, we are better than that. We are better than this. We should be a city built on inclusive excellence. We should hold each person accountable for inclusive behavior, and we should encourage courageous action. We should be a community built on trust by now, openness and civility that allows for honest conversations about difficult subjects, one that cares for and helps all members of our city, not just the few or the ones that look like we do, think like we do, or live like we do. We can hold different beliefs. We can be of different political parties, but we can still be civil to one another. There is no room for name-calling here. There's no room for racism or any of the isms. My call today is for you to personally commit to these behaviors, to reverse the legacy of racism in our community through your own compassion and commitment. By truly listening and striving to achieve an understanding of another's reality and circumstances and to rally for what is right. We cannot stand idle, and we cannot allow evil of any kind against any one of us prevail. Let us lead the way as a beacon of inclusivity and as a voice of change. That is our responsibility as leaders and as citizens. We have to help each other process and get through these times. We have to help our young adults, our children, and all families process what is happening in our society.
I've got a question for you, Mayor, if you don't mind. Just wondering, what are some of the things that you are hearing from the community as the leader of this city, other than some of the things that you've mentioned, and how are you doing?
The community, I understand, wants to be heard. There's an opportunity for everyone to have free speech. There's an opportunity for everyone to voice their frustration. But I want people to understand, I want our community, our protesters, those people, those bad actors who showed up last night at some point, we are obligated to keep our community safe. I want people to be able to go home after their expressions, their voices are heard, their peaceful protests to their families, to their kids. I want our officers to be able to go home to their kids. I want our city administration. I think as a community, we want the opportunity to have the ability to protest peacefully, but we also all want to remain in a safe community, a community that advances ideas and principles and policies and regulations. I want the community to know there is a process by which we advance all of that. And it works when we allow it to work. It can be frustrating, it can be lengthy, but that's why we make calls prior to now before everyone getting involved. Everyone coming out to meetings, everyone letting your voices be heard. We've come through the potential flooding of a dam. We've come through tornadoes. We've come through this pandemic that we're still in, signs. Everyone has a personal self-responsibility. I can look back at my council members, and for several weeks we've been going through a budget process every week. And I say, wear your mask, personal self-responsibility, accountability. It's on all of us to make the difference going forward. not just for our community. We all have friends and relatives who live in all of these other cities who are being affected. We are at an unprecedented time in our era of living. And I don't know any community that has the playbook for that, that has the rules all in place for what we are seeing now. We have to come together, lock arms going forward, and make it happen in uncharted, unknown territory. But we have to stand on the side of right in this time and at this moment. You asked, how am I? I'm good. I'm good, because I know we're going to get through this. I will tell you, it was more hurtful. I'm a mama to 2 African-American males and an African-American daughter. A grandmother to 2 African-American grandsons, and countless other kids that I just love. And to see the hurt in so many faces, to feel it in people's voices. Mamas are strong. Mamas in this country have always been strong. I want to say that I pray for all the families that have been affected by all of the violence we've seen in the past several weeks. I can't imagine losing a child or children to what other families have had to deal with. But I can pray. I always wake up knowing it's a new day to be better and to do better. And that's incumbent on all of us. Every single parent, mentor, teacher, leader, director, organization volunteer, we all now have a responsibility that you cannot wait to be told how you should feel, how you should react. I can't teach you anymore how to understand right is right, wrong is wrong. I don't think any of us want to teach anymore that. You have to know it, practice it, and live it now. And that's the only way going forward that's going to help us all come together.